The Navy did not have to break into Hedy Lamarr's house to take her invention. They did not need to threaten her. They did not need to drag her into a courtroom. They did not even need to understand her. All they had to do was smile, accept the patent, put it on a shelf, and send her back to the one job they thought she was good for: being beautiful. In 1942, Hedy Lamarr walked into the American war machine with a secret communication system. On paper, it was meant for radio-guided torpedoes. In practice, it described a way for a signal to jump from frequency to frequency so fast that an enemy could not easily block it. Decades later, that basic idea would sit underneath the wireless world: Bluetooth, GPS cell networks, secure military communication, the invisible systems that let billions of devices whisper through the air without crashing into each other. But when Hedy brought it forward, the Navy did not see the future of wireless technology. They saw a movie star. So they took the idea, ignored the inventor, and told her she could help the country more by selling war bonds with her face. And to understand how a Hollywood actress ended up inventing a technology the world would one day run on, you have to go back to the life she was trying to escape. Before she was Hedy Lamarr, she was Hedwig Kiesler, a girl in Vienna who liked to take things apart just to see why they worked. Her father encouraged it. He would walk with her through the city and explain machines in simple pieces: streetcars, printing presses, engines, not as magic, but as systems. One part pulls, one part turns, one part sends power to the next. That mattered, because Hedy would spend most of her adult life surrounded by people who looked at her and assumed there was nothing going on behind her eyes. Hollywood made this worse. When she arrived in America, the studios understood exactly how to sell her. They called her one of the most beautiful women in the world. They put her in gowns, lit her face like a statue, and built a whole career around the idea that she was meant to be watched, not listened to. But Hedy hated being trapped inside that image. Between takes, while other actors rested, she invented. She sketched. She came up with little devices and chemical ideas. Her house reportedly had a drafting table, not just mirrors and jewelry. The strange part is that the knowledge she needed for her biggest invention did not come from Hollywood. It came from the darker life she had left behind. Her first husband had been tied to the arms industry in Europe. At dinners, Hedy heard men talk about weapons, ships, radio control, and the weaknesses of modern warfare. They did not think the young actress at the table was collecting anything useful. But she was. And when war spread across Europe, those memories suddenly turned into something practical. Because one of the biggest problems at sea was not just building a weapon that could move through water. It was controlling it after launch. A radio-guided torpedo sounds powerful until you realize the obvious weakness. Radio lives in the open air. If your signal stays on one frequency, the enemy can find it. If the enemy can find it, they can jam it. And if they can jam it, your expensive weapon becomes a blind machine drifting through the water. Hedy understood the problem in almost childish terms. If someone keeps blocking the same door, stop using the same door. Make the signal hop. One moment, it speaks on one frequency. The next moment, it jumps to another. Then another. Then another. The transmitter and receiver both know the pattern, but the enemy does not. To anyone trying to interfere, the message is not a clean target. It is a moving target. That was the seed. But she needed a way to make two devices jump together at the exact same time. And this is where the story becomes almost absurd. Her co-inventor was not a Navy engineer. It was George Antheil, an avant-garde composer famous for mechanical music and player pianos. Player pianos worked by reading punched rolls. The holes told the piano what notes to play and when to play them. So Hedy and Antheil imagined a similar system for radio. Two synchronized rolls, one in the transmitter and one in the receiver, telling both machines when to hop frequencies. The idea used 88 possible jumps, like the 88 keys on a piano. It was elegant, it was strange, and it was early. Maybe too early. Because the next thing they did should have changed Hedy's life forever. Instead, it began the long process of removing her from her own invention. On June 10, 1941, the patent application was filed under the name Hedy Kiesler Markey, using her married name. On August 11, 1942, U.S. Patent 2,292,387 was granted for a secret communication system. The name sounds like something from a spy novel, but the drawings were real. The claims were real. The problem was real. This was not a vague idea scribbled on a napkin. It was a protected invention for secure communication using changing carrier frequencies. Then Hedy and Antheil did something that, in another version of history, might have made them national heroes. They offered it to the U.S. Navy. This is where the betrayal becomes quiet. The Navy did not need to steal the patent in a dramatic way. Hedy and Antheil were trying to help. They handed over the concept because ships were at risk and the country was at war. But Navy researchers looked at the system and saw problems. The mechanical rolls seemed too bulky. Torpedoes had limited space. Electronics had not yet caught up with the elegance of the idea. So instead of building it, they shelved it. And then came the insult that explains the whole story. Hedy Lamarr was encouraged to help the war effort by selling bonds. Not by solving technical problems. Not by working with engineers. Not by developing a communication system that could resist jamming. By standing in public and being beautiful. And she did it. She sold millions in bonds. She became useful to the system in the one way the system already understood. But while her face raised money, her invention sat in the dark, and the clock on the patent kept ticking. Patents do not wait for society to become fair. They do not wait for the right people to admit they were wrong. They expire. Hedy's patent ran out in 1959. No royalties. No licensing empire. No seat at the table when the technology finally became useful. And that is the cruelest part of the story, because by the time the world was ready for her idea, the invention no longer belonged to her. In the years after World War II, electronics changed fast. Vacuum tubes gave way to transistors. Circuits became smaller. Systems that seemed too clunky in 1942 started to look possible. Then the same basic concept Hedy had helped patent began appearing where it had always made the most sense. Military communication. The Navy that had dismissed her idea during the war later used spread-spectrum concepts in secure systems. By the early 1960s, the technology was no longer a fantasy from a Hollywood actress and a composer. It was becoming practical engineering. But by then, Hedy's patent had already expired. That meant the world could use the idea without paying her a cent. This is where the story changes from unfair to almost unbelievable. Because frequency hopping was not just a clever trick for torpedoes. It was a doorway into modern wireless life. If devices are going to share the air, they need ways to avoid interference. If signals can be intercepted, they need ways to hide inside noise. If many users need to communicate at once, they need systems that separate messages without giving every person a private road. Spread spectrum thinking helped make that possible. Bluetooth uses frequency hopping to dodge interference in crowded spaces. GPS depends on spread spectrum style signals that can be pulled out of background noise. CDMA cellular systems used code-based spread spectrum ideas to let many calls share the same band. The world Hedy imagined for wartime secrecy became the world everyone carries in their pocket. A phone connects to earbuds. A car talks to satellites. A payment terminal finds a signal. A military radio avoids interference. A wireless device jumps through invisible lanes in the air. And somewhere underneath that world is Patent 2,292,387, filed by a woman many executives of her time treated like decoration. The money built on these ideas became enormous. Not millions, not even just billions. $100 billion plus wireless economy grew around concepts that once looked too strange to install inside a torpedo. But Hedy Lamarr got no royalties. Not when the military used related systems. Not when wireless companies expanded them. Not when Bluetooth became normal. Not when phones became the center of modern life. The patent had expired. The inventor had been dismissed. The story had been filed away. For decades, people remembered the face and forgot the mind. That may be the most uncomfortable part. Hedy was not ignored because her idea was useless. She was ignored because the people in charge could not fit her into the category of inventor. A composer could help her. A patent office could approve her. Later engineers could build around the same principle. But in the 1940s, the Navy could look at Hedy Lamarr and still see only a glamorous actress. That mistake cost her the future value of her invention. And it cost the world something harder to measure: decades of knowing who had really seen the future early. Only near the end of her life did recognition finally arrive. In 1997, the Electronic Frontier Foundation honored Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil with a Pioneer Award for their work on spread-spectrum communication. By then, Hedy was in her 80s. The technology had already escaped into the world. The money had already gone somewhere else. Her son accepted the award for her. Hedy reportedly had a simple reaction: it was about time. 3 years later, she passed away. By then, the myth of Hedy Lamarr had split in two. There was the Hollywood version, frozen in black and white glamour. And there was the hidden version, the inventor sitting at a drafting table, trying to solve a problem the experts dismissed until it became impossible to ignore. The tragedy is not that Hedy Lamarr was never beautiful. She was. The tragedy is that beauty became the cage people used to keep her intelligence out of the room. Patent 2,292,387 did not make her rich. It did not make her a technology executive. It did not give her control over the wireless future she helped imagine. But it did survive. Every time a signal jumps, hides, shares space, or finds its way through noise, the old idea comes back. Not as a museum piece, not as a forgotten sketch, but as a living part of the modern world. Hedy Lamarr did not get the royalties. She did not get the industry. She barely got the applause while she was alive. But the system that told her to go sell war bonds could not erase the one thing that mattered most. She had seen the future before they did.